Hey.
Hey. So did you have a good time last night?
I did. I went to Waffle House with some friends.
Olivia came home from work about 9:15 p.m., changed her clothes, dashed out the door to make sure that she got some of that Waffle House
coffee. Hello and welcome to the Resilient Lineage podcast, where we reflect on the past, anticipate the future, and discover what God is up to today. I'm Olivia.
And I'm Milo.
And their coffee's so good. Like, it's actually addicting. I think I had 4 cups last night.
Oh, geez.
But it was decaf.
Oh, it was? Decaf is hard to pull off. Like a good cup of decaf.
It was good.
Well, that's good.
No cream, no sugar, just black.
You know, we've talked about Waffle House before.
Yes, we have. It's an experience, man.
This episode is brought to you by
Waffle House.
Open 24/7. Just kidding, it's not. So we have no affiliation with Waffle House. This is not a paid for promotion.
That was just our intro.
Just something that is part of our lives. And we're glad you're listening. So thanks for jumping in today. Today we're going to look at Matthew chapter 7, verses 1 through 5. And I'm going to give some backstory to this in a second. But before we dive into this, just want to remind you, our listeners, that you can always grab these show notes. And I don't know if you follow us on Facebook or Instagram. I'm on X. Like, there's some different places we meet. And we post a lot of these things as images, like the show notes or the points, the kind of the big points from our show on those platforms as like little nice images. That would be awesome if you shared that specifically, because in that there's like a link to the podcast and things.
Yeah.
So if you're not friends with us, you can either friend or follow us, because like, I don't know about yours, but my stuff is public on those platforms. So feel free to hunt me down there and, well, don't hunt me down, but you know what I mean? Like, find me. And then help us, kind of get this word out, because we think this is good stuff and we think it'll be helpful to other folks. And even as you comment on it, feel free to like say how it was helpful to you.
Yeah.
Because we want, again, we're less concerned about people knowing who we are. We're more concerned about people experiencing the life that Christ has for them. As Olivia says at the beginning of the podcast, we want to reflect on the past, anticipate the future, and discover what God is up to today. I think there is a tremendous amount of wisdom in the scriptures. I think we do a pretty good job of like, okay, what does that look like today? How do we apply that? Because God has a great future in store for you. He has a great future in store for me. And we want to move forward with confidence into whatever that future is. And one of the ways we do that is to live confidently today with the wisdom that the Lord gives us today through things like his scriptures. So it's just a shameless plug to kind of, if you could help us kind of help others enjoy that. And we know people are plugged into churches and they have other sources that they use to spiritually encourage themselves, which is great. So we're not wanting to take away from any of that. If anything, we just want to supplement that. So help us get the word out in that way. Okay, enough like shameless plugging over. Gonna get that out of the way.
Yeah.
Okay, we're gonna go over a passage of scripture, Matthew 7 verses 1 through 5, this is the famous like speck and log in your eye passage of scripture. Now, having said that, let me kind of set up this teaching, because I sent you these notes.
Yeah.
That were sermon notes from a sermon I did when I was on one of the U.S. Navy warships. And this was something that I preached while aboard that ship. Because we're out at sea for, weeks at a time, sometimes months at a time, close quarters. Everybody gets to know everybody really, really well. And when you're in those kind of confined, intimate spaces, you become very aware of the shortcomings that exist in other people's lives, like the little things that drive you nuts, the personality idiosyncrasies, some of the relational tensions that, get into place, things that people said they were going to do that they don't do. And, people are remembering that. Anyway, I preached this sermon in that context where people got very, very, very close to one another. And so I recognize that oftentimes that level of intimacy, a lot of people don't necessarily have in their normal everyday life. Like if somebody drives me nuts at work, well, I'm leaving at 2:00 anyway, or 3:00 or 5:00 this afternoon. Do you know what I mean? And
Yeah.
so I can just go home and they're not in my life anymore. Maybe family would be maybe an intimate place, right? Like for something like that, or a roommate I might have. The point is that there are going to be those times in life when you're going to be thrust into these relational contexts where you're going to become incredibly aware of the shortcomings that exist in somebody else's life. And the temptation is going to be to, behave in a certain way, have attitudes, and maybe even say some things or do some things that are going to fracture those relationships. And that is not the type of life we're supposed to live. We're supposed to be people of peace. We're supposed to be people of humility. We're supposed to be people of truth. And so what does it look like that when these realities exist, that I'm become incredibly aware of somebody's shortcoming? What do I need to do in light of that? What's an appropriate response? So do you think that's enough setup?
Yeah.
Okay.
That's
so
good.
do you want to read the passage of scripture for us? Okay.
Yeah. So it's Matthew 7, verses 1-5. And it says, "Do not judge, or you too will be judged. For in the same way you judge others, you will be judged. And with the same measure you use it, it will be measured to you. Why do you look at the speck of sawdust in your brother's eye and pay no attention to the plank in your own eye? How can you say to your brother, 'Let me take that speck out of your eye,' when all this time you've had a plank in your own eye? You hypocrite, first take the plank out of your own eye, and then you will see clearly to remove the speck from your brother's eye."
Okay. No, go ahead.
So, as I was reading that, I was just, I started searching. I'm like, give me the principle out of all of this. Don't you kind of already know the principle of, just don't judge.
Well, and if I can clarify something here, the word judge here, it means something very specific, because I think sometimes people will use that word judge and don't judge me, man. I'm like, well, the scripture doesn't call us to not be observant. Mm-hmm. So this is not about observing things in people's lives.
Right.
This is not about, coming to reasonable conclusions. The word judge here means to condemn. So this is about bringing condemnation into somebody's life, or bringing some type of judicious consequence in their life. Does that make sense?
With the implication that you're setting yourself higher than they are.
Yeah. And so so I just want to clear that up, because I know sometimes people will use this passage of scripture as a blunt object against other people. And it's like, don't judge me. You're judging me. It's like, well, the fact you're saying don't judge me, you're judging me, means that you're judging them, thinking that they are judging
me. Yeah.
So this is like you're in a loop here, right? So So the word judge here means to condemn.
To condemn, yeah.
Yeah. But you were talking about the principle, the overall principle for this.
And so when it got down to let me take that speck out of your own eye, a speck can seem practically invisible to everyone around you. It might not be as obvious as it may be to other people in a room. And the only really people that would notice a speck is the person themselves, because the speck in your eye is irritating, or someone that's trying to identify it with a passion. They are searching for it to pull it out of someone, versus a log. I don't know if you've ever seen a log in someone's eye.
Or a plank. But
I guarantee it would be noticeable to everyone else in the room.
Well, and I think that,
or it could seem noticeable to people in the room.
Yeah, and I think what Jesus is pointing out here is, it's like, have you ever, I saw somebody do this as an illustration. It's like if you imagine you're standing in your driveway and you have your car right there. Look at the car, right? And then, but maybe you're 30, 40 feet away from it. If you hold up your thumb or hold up your hand, you may be able to block out that car with your hand. Now, does that mean your hand is bigger than the car?
No.
No, it just means that your hand is in closer proximity to your perspective than what the car is. And so this idea of these planks and splinters, right, or these logs and splinters, is that when you have something small in your eye, it is rather large. To you, it's obstructing the way you see the world. It's obstructing the way you operate in the world. The problem is that so long as that is there, it's obstructing the way you operate in this world. It makes it difficult for you to rightly size the obstacles that may be in somebody else's life.
Oh, that's good.
So if you have, because let's say you have a speck in your eye, I may be able to see. But if I've got a speck in my eye, it is as if I had a plank.
Yeah.
Right, because it appears so big. But I'm ignoring that. And in fact, that might be keeping me from seeing the full picture of what's actually going on here. And I think it's, a couple of years ago, I was making something. I don't remember what it was. I was in the garage and I was using a chop saw and I was cutting aluminum with my chop saw. And I had glasses on, but it was real windy that day. And some of the aluminum got kicked up and some of it went in my eye, or at least I thought it went into my eye. And, I rubbed it, which is not what you're supposed to do. I took some water. I tried to rinse it out, nothing. And it just felt like something, it felt like a piece of sandpaper in my eye the whole time. Now, here's the thing. While that is happening, what do you think, while that's there, what do you think my general attitude is towards life?
Not great.
Yeah, it's probably, it was one of annoyance, one of bothersome. So, you guys were a little bit younger at the time.
You can't really see it.
Yeah, you can't see it, but it's there. It's aware. I know something was, but maybe it was just something. Maybe it's bothersome because I rubbed my eye, right? And so if you and your brother, because you guys were younger at the time, if you're a little bit squirrely after I've told you hey, knock it off, and you're not knocking it off, my attitude, I might have an overreaction.
Yeah.
Why? Because my attitude's already in a bad place. I'm already moderately annoyed. I'm physically bothered. The fact I probably had to stop a project, go address this, means now I'm behind where I thought I was going to be. Do you know what I mean? There's all of these things that go into this. So fast forward a day or two, and it's still bothering me. And fortunately, my optometrist was somebody I knew. And so when I called their office, I said, hey, can I get in? And they're like, yeah, what's going on? I said, I think I got some metal shavings in my eye. They're like, get in right now. So I go down there and again, quote unquote, can I see fine? Yeah. Right? I can drive there. If anybody were to see me, they might not really see I have anything. But do I know I have something?
Yeah.
Something isn't right. And it's affecting other parts of my life in a way that might not be evident to others, to where somebody may go man, Milo's in a bad mood today. Milo's, super on edge today. Milo's whatever, right? Or the last few days or whatever it is. So I go down there, I sit down, and I remember the optometrist, they lean me back, they bring down the lights in the room. You know that setting where all of a sudden and you can see they got that bright light, and they're looking in there, and the optometrist looks at me, she's like, oh, yep, there it is. I see it. And she pulls out a metal sliver. And then she goes, oh, there's another one. And she pulls that out. She goes, what were you doing? And so I tell her a story. And she's like, were you wearing glasses? I was like, yeah, I was wearing glasses. It was the wind. She's like, okay. She goes, oh, well, there's some wood too. So she pulls wood out of my eye. Now, here's the thing. I wasn't working on wood that day. So who knows how long there had been a little speck of wood floating around in my eye that was also causing me problems. That was probably fortunately our eyes can heal rather fast. Yeah. But it was this thing where I had this thing in my eye I didn't even know was there, but I guarantee it was impacting the way I lived. Does that make sense?
No, yeah.
And so when Jesus, so this is the brilliance of when you read Jesus, right? It's these principles that extend beyond the moment. Here we are 2,000 years later, and I go hey man, have you ever gotten something in your eye? And it's incredibly annoying, and it shapes the way you interact with the world that day. Everybody's like, oh, that's happened to me. It's a brilliant, right? No, yeah. It's super, super brilliant. So the question is that we're going to wrestle with is how can we grow in our righteousness? In other words, our right relationship with God, our right relationship with others, the right relationship we have with ourselves, the creation he's called us to steward. So, because Jesus calls us to wrestle with our issues, right? To have those things addressed.
Before you help other people.
Yeah.
Or before you do your next step.
Yeah.
Without jumping ahead, and then it's like, whoa.
Yeah. And which is a tricky thing, right? Because this is not what we're not saying is you have to do you before you can help anybody else. Because then you'll never help anybody else. But there's a measure of you have to be on that journey.
Yeah.
Of letting the Lord kind of work out these things in your eye, the way you perceive the world, so that you can be of growing benefit to those that are around you.
100%.
And I think that's not a one and done type thing. Like different stages, different responsibilities, different relationships pull things out within us that reveal where we may have limited or obstructed perspective.
Yeah.
Okay.
Cool.
Thoughts before we start going into this?
Let's just dive on in.
Okay, so we're going to look at some things that we can do to remove these specks that are actually logs, right? These things that obstruct how we do life. Now, having said that, there's our part in all of this. The end of the day, this is a work of the Holy Spirit in our lives. So you don't get it. I don't get to sit there and go, hey, doc, I know you see that speck. Just give me the tweezers. I'll take care of it myself. Thanks for confirming what I suspected. I got this, right? That's not what we're talking about. We're talking about how do we put ourselves in a position, because there's a role we have with that. Just like I had to get in the car, I had to make the appointment, I had to get in the car, I had to go to a place that could offer me the appropriate help, right? There was things I had to do to get those things out of my life.
Yeah.
So what's my role in allowing these things to be worked out in my life by the Holy Spirit according to the work of Christ that was accomplished for us on the cross? So I just want to be crystal clear, because I don't want people listening to this podcast thinking, oh yeah, 4 things I can do to better my life. It's like, well, 4 things you can do to put yourself in a position for God to better your life. Do you know what I mean? Like at the end of the day, he's the one doing the work. It's not us doing the work. It's us putting ourselves in a position for him to do the work. Yeah. Okay. You want to tee us off?
I got you.
Okay.
Number 1.
Number 1.
Embrace a mindset of responsibility. Just let that sink in.
What do you think the opposite of that is? Instead of embrace a mindset of responsibility, and don't say irresponsibility. What would be the opposite of responsibility, do you think?
Laziness. Or reluctance.
Reluctant. That's a good word.
Choosing to neglect something.
Yeah.
Like you know what you need to do. It's obvious what you need to do. It is clear in your life what steps you need to be taking.
Yeah.
And it's an intentional choice of saying nope.
I guarantee, because I know how we operate, I guarantee that when that piece of sliver went in my eye and I went in the bathroom and I was washing out, I don't remember this explicitly, but your mom probably went, what happened? And I probably went, nothing, don't worry about it.
Don't we all say that to Bethany?
And she probably was like, did you get something in your eye? And I probably said, yeah, something. And then I could see her going, well, you need to call Dr. So-and-so. And I probably went, no, I'm fine.
It'll just come out. I'll just cry it out. Or I'll just,
It'll be okay.
It'll figure itself out.
Yeah. Yeah. And so, in that case, it's like your mom would have been, she was probably, because that's usually if I end up at the doctor, it's because your mom's encouraged me to go to the doctor. Rarely do I ever just do it. So,
oh no, I hurt my thumb. Gotta go.
No, that's not my.
It's not his forte.
Okay, so there's some things underneath it, some mindsets that could get in the way of a mindset of responsibility. So the first one is that we need to reject a mindset of blame.
Let that sink in too.
Yeah.
And also, like, I mean, you might be put in a position where you're hurt by someone, or there was a situation that you got involved with that it might not have been started by your fault. But what are you going to do to help resolve it? Yeah. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. This isn't like, okay, it's their fault. I'm going to wait for them to ask for forgiveness or wait for them to apologize or whatever the case may be. It's not my fault. I'm just going to let you guys figure it out.
I had years ago, my first church, there was somebody who started attending our church who had attended it at one point in the past, and they had been a significant leader in that church. And so when they moved back to the town and they started attending the church again, they had a very, people were very aware of their presence in the life of the church. They had a very large presence. You know when you meet somebody like that? And I asked them, I said, hey, would you ever want to go out for coffee or breakfast or something? They're like, yeah, sure. I said, because I'd love to hear about your experience with the church because it predated me. And so there was some history there that I wanted to learn about. And so when I took them out, I said, so what led to you leaving the church back in 19, whatever it was? And this person began to tell me a story about a conflict they had with another individual. But the way they told the story was as if it happened a week ago. Like the anger that came into their voice, the tenseness that I saw in their body as they stopped eating their breakfast. Like a sense of appetite was lost in the moment. Do you know what I mean? It was like, I remember sitting there thinking like, holy,
like they're still wrestling.
They are still in this. They have not forgiven this individual. They have not assumed a posture of there is no peace. There's no joy. And so I think it's one of those and I wasn't in a place to kind of say anything
right
in that particular time or moment. Because I didn't feel like I had permission from that person to speak into their life in that sort of way. And so, but what I remember leaving thinking, man, it doesn't matter when the offense happens. If you choose this posture of blaming people, you will live with something far longer than you should have, and it will continually limit your perspective on things. Because it was this other person's fault. It was this other person's fault I had to leave the church. It was this other person's fault that these other negative things in my life took place. It was this other person's fault. And the thing is, the person they were blaming for all of those things had died. They were no longer alive. So it wasn't like this was still an active relationship where tension existed. The person they were blaming was dead. So in that moment, it was like it was wrecking them. So reject a mindset of blame.
Oh my.
Yeah. Okay, so if we're supposed to embrace a mindset of responsibility, reject a mindset of blame. What's the second we're supposed to reject?
A mindset of indifference.
Yeah. And I think this kind of comes with what you were talking about, with like neglecting it.
Taking yourself out of something.
Yeah, it doesn't matter. It's not a big deal. Like, well, it is.
Postpone it. And I also I think that indifference can lead to pride.
How so?
In a sense that I don't want to say different, but I'm set apart from you. And it can, if you're given a responsibility, whatever it may be, you might be thinking oh, I'm better at this than someone else. Or there's an ego starting to cultivate that at the end of the day, it really doesn't matter who's better at it or not, as long as the job gets done.
Sure.
And I think that can really upset a lot of people. You're not doing it the way I do it. You're not taking the steps I take, or that I have, or if you're training someone that I've trained you, but if their system's getting the same job done in a way that is appropriate, it might be different, but at the end of the day.
Well, and that leads to the other mentality, which is reject this, a mindset of narcissism, which is I'm always right.
Listen to me.
Or here's a problem I have. Everybody needs to stop what they're doing because I have this problem. Do you know, everybody needs to reorder their lives because I have this thing that's bothering me. Everybody needs to reshape their day and how they interact with one another because of the attitude that I find myself in. Like, have you ever found that person that if there's a group of people kind of laughing and having a good time, and if they're not in a good mood, they come in and they do not want to see anybody else having a good time? Nobody else should be in a good mood because they're not. Or if you are, then obviously you're not taking their issues very seriously. It's incredibly narcissistic. And it comes from this, like, you have a plank in your eye, bro. Like, you have something in your eye that is reshaping the way you interact with other people. And in that particular case, you are wanting to reshape the way other people interact with one another because of your issue. Isn't that fascinating?
Yes. You're
staring deeply at me. Like you have...
It's very fresh.
Okay. So I think that, so this first point is like, one, you have to embrace this mindset of responsibility. And so if you find yourself gravitating towards, well, I want to blame others. Whoa. Whose issue is this? This is my issue. It's not their issue. Maybe I'm here because of them. Doesn't matter. Here I am. Right? I could have been like, when I got that metal shaving in my eye, I could have been like, man, the weather guy said it was going to be a nice day and no wind. That's why I chose to do it this day. And the wind kicked up and a piece of metal in my eye. I can't believe that weather guy. He sucks. Do you know what I mean? Like, what value is that? Zero. Yeah. It doesn't accomplish anything. You're still going to have this issue in your life. So knock off the blaming, or kind of that indifference of like, well, I'll deal with it tomorrow. I had to deal with it 2 days ago. I'm like, well, I've always wanted to look like a pirate anyway, so I'll just get a patch. And you know what I mean? It's like, no, man, like this is going to limit your ability moving forward to embrace the life you should be able to live.
And I also think that like that just revolves around the act of just surrender and just give it to God. Like, I'm still thinking about that story you shared about that person. Like, they had not given it to God
at all. Or it wasn't in that meeting I had with that breakfast I had with him. It didn't seem evident because this was something that had happened like 15 years prior.
Right. And just like they dive and dwell in that situation that it alters the way you think of people, and then it alters the people, like the community around them.
It reshapes your perspective.
Yeah.
And I think that's an interesting point because it doesn't reshape a perspective of hope of what God's redeemed people could be. It reshapes your perspective around wounding of, I've got to be careful because people out there want to hurt me. And so if you find yourself in one of those two, kind of leaning in one of those two places, like you can tell when somebody steps into a new community if they've been part of healthy communities. Because if they've been part of healthy communities, they quickly find ways to connect and relate with others. Because they've experienced that kind of value and knowing how to build that trust in the past. If people have been part of unhealthy communities, and by communities could be anything from a church to a small group to a Bible study to their family unit to close friends, whatever that is. If they've been betrayed, if they've been hurt by people in the past, if their trust has been violated, then when they step into a new community, there's almost an assumption that these people will hurt me as well. And so my objective is to limit the amount of pain I experience, not enjoy the community God may have for me.
That just reminded me of something that I was like going through for a minute. About a month ago, like I came to church, right? And I wasn't greeted at the door.
Oh, no.
I know, right?
Were you offended?
I really was. I'm like not even joking.
Are you serious?
I am so serious.
Why were you offended?
They were out there They were greeters talking to other greeters, but they weren't greeting the people walking in.
Oh my goodness.
So I was like furious. Me at like 8:15 by myself in the morning. I guarantee I got up at like 7:50, like rolled out of bed. And I just had this mindset of like,
I should have been greeted.
Right? And so I just started like diving into this whirlwind of thought of like, if they're not doing their job and these are the volunteers that our church has, like who's not doing their end and then who is, but where are they? And just getting lost in this cycle of like everything. And so I go to my youth pastor and I was still furious about this like 2 hours later. And I was like, hey, I want you to know I wasn't greeted this morning. And he was like, Olivia, what? And I was like, I just, like I just felt hurt. Like these are the people that are here. Like there were 5 of them outside. Like they didn't greet me. He was like, you just need to let that go. Like, at least they were, like, at least we have people on the team. And I was like, not the right people. Anyway, so then I was still furious.
Welcome to Confessions with Olivia.
No, for real. Okay, it gets better. So that evening, we were having, like, a youth hangout at our youth pastor's house. And he made us food and everything. And, he, like, dropped a line.
Oh, did he double back with you on
He
it?
double backed, but like in a group setting.
Oh, that's always
that
nice.
wasn't personal, but
Sure.
like it was because I was still furious about it. And then 8:15 to like 6 p.m. at night, I'm like, I still wasn't greeted that morning. Anyway, so then he was like, if there's an issue with whatever you guys have in the church, take initiative, and if people aren't doing it, then what are you going to do about it?
Yeah, that's a good
What
word.
responsibility are you going to step into? Because if these are your suggestions, follow through with it. And I just remember sitting there with all the conviction and all the burdens on my shoulders. And I'm like, Lord, it's yours.
Well, and that's a great story, because in that particular story, while you are annoyed that these people,
To say the least.
that these people did not demonstrate a spirit of hospitality towards you, are you demonstrating a spirit of hospitality towards others?
them.
Right?
Right? And
And so this, again, becomes one of those things that the very thing that I'm offended by becomes the very thing I end up projecting.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You're welcome. Good note. I'm glad the Lord brought that to mind. I was like, you know what?
man.
I should probably share it.
We're getting practical in this podcast. Okay. Let's press on. What's
Point
the second
2.
thing?
Devote myself to difficult truths. Let that sink in. This is a sinking in episode.
So what we're doing is we're going to share like some things to do to remove the log. And so there's going to be 3 things that kind of like we need to do, but then some things we need to reject. You want to go over the first, to embrace those difficult truths. What are some things we have to reject?
You have to reject convenient lies that cover up the truth.
Yeah. Yeah. I was having a conversation one time with somebody, and, they were trusting me with some private information, and they said, well, this person said this, and that they were using that to justify their
Position.
And I was like, well, do you know they said that? And they're like, well, I heard they said that. You heard that's what they said. Well, it was something like that. Well, did they say it or not? Well, they didn't exactly say that. They inferred it, and they inferred it to this person who came and told me. Well, what did they say to infer it? Well, they said this other thing, and they told me what it was. And it was like, the only way you're going to be able to connect that comment to your offense is if you want to connect that comment to your offense. It's not evident that that's what they were even referring to. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. And so I was like, I don't know. Maybe they did. Maybe not. I don't know. I wasn't in the room. I wasn't part of that conversation. But so long as you hang on to this perspective, which is breeding a lie in your life, that of what they think of you, because I know what they think of you, and this is not what they think of you, then you're going to live with a fractured relationship. And what ended up happening is I said, with your permission, I'd like to ask them their thoughts about you, and I'll double back with you. And they're like, okay. So I went to that individual and I said, hey, by the way, how's, this going, that going? Yeah. How's your team going? Yeah. What do you think of these folks? And then I was like, hey, how's so-and-so doing, so-and-so? And then I mentioned the person by name that they had been working with that had talked to me. So I'm kind of clouding it, right? So I'm not talking about this person explicitly. And I'm this is one of the things we do as chaplains to sort of tease out a situation without breaking confidentiality. And so they said, oh man, that person, they are crushing it. They're like doing a great job. And I've seen them do this. And they had nothing but positive things to say about them. I was like, how's your relationship with them? They're like, it's good as far as I can tell. Like, I noticed they were kind of in a bad mood this morning, but I don't know why. I know they got this personal issue going on in their life. And so maybe it was that. I don't know. But yeah, I think everything's fine. And then they looked at me and they're like, why do you ask? And I was like, well, I'm just wondering, like, how's your relationship with so-and-so? And then I kind of went around the room to, the other folks they work with. And they were like, oh, yeah, that's good. That one's a little strained, and they kind of talked with through some things. So then I double backed with the person. And I said, so do you want to know what they said? And they were like, what? And I said, they think the world of you. They think you're doing a great job. They think da-da-da-da-da-da-da. And they saw that you were a little bit upset, but they thought it was about this other issue. And they're like, really? They said all of that? I was like, yeah. And they're like, oh, well, I guess that makes sense because they don't normally do. All of a sudden, they began to start untangling the lie that sort of had wrapped itself around this relationship. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And so if we're going to really see the world the way God wants us to see the world, we have to be able to devote ourselves to difficult truths. Now, I'm going to quote Mike Ashcraft, who's pastor of Port City Community Church.
North Carolina.
In North Carolina. He has this great phrase that I've never heard anybody say it, so I don't know if it originates with him or it came from somebody else, but I heard him say during Christmas one time. It was a Christmas sermon series. He said, the world wants to equate truth with facts. The scriptures call us to equate truth with a person. So the scriptures say, who is the truth? Jesus said, I am the way, the truth, and the life. And so if I'm going to devote myself to the truth, I am actually devoting myself to the person of Jesus Christ. I'm discovering what that means. That's why personally for me, anytime I sit down with somebody and they may be far away from God, don't believe in God, not into Christianity or any of that kind of stuff, don't believe in the authority of Scripture, like they just reject it all, but they're hungry for the truth. I've more than once I've said, man, if you stay hungry for the truth, you will find it. Now, you might not like what you find, and it may wreck you in some of your perspectives. But I'm confident that you'll find it because the truth does not want to stay hidden. And the whole time, when I'm saying the truth, what can I substitute the word for? Jesus. If you're hungry for Jesus, you will find him. If you really want Jesus, you will. It may be inconvenient and it may wreck you. Do you know what I mean? Like, it's that idea. So,
yeah.
Okay, so reject convenient lies that cover up the truth.
Reject distractions that draw me away from the truth.
What do you think that means? How could you see
in
that?
like this perspective, just getting like so caught up on what the issue is versus okay, what do I need to do to get this resolved? Or what else should I be looking at?
Yeah.
What else was I intended to look at in that moment? That now this came up? Was my mission stopped because of this? Or should I just... Mom uses the phrase swim in the pee. Like, get out.
Wait, what?
Yeah, sorry.
Mom says swim in the pee?
Yeah, she mentioned it Sunday in our discussion groups.
Oh.
I was going to say it on Sunday, but...
Okay. What does that mean?
Sidetrack. Just, like, get yourself out of the situation.
Oh, I see.
Like, stop what you're doing. That's hindering what you're supposed to be looking for.
Got it.
Now you're just swimming in your pee.
Okay. That's a very powerful metaphor, I suppose.
That's what I'm saying.
the other thing too is the enemy will not want you to gain the perspective that God has for you. And so he will always offer up convenient distractions. One of the things I always pay attention to is as I'm working with somebody, I do these, I haven't done one in a while, unfortunately, but I do these prayer sessions with people where we systematically walk through some areas in their life and then pray for God to bring freedom in those areas in their life. It's a really intense process. And one of the things I pay attention to sometimes it's just as I'm talking to somebody about them experiencing the freedom Christ has for them, is as we talk about it, how quickly their mind gets distracted with other things, or how quickly they don't want to focus on the issue that's at hand. And it's fascinating because we could talk about something that has no eternal consequence and no bearing on their soul, and they can stay incredibly focused. But the minute we start talking about matters of their heart and experiencing the redemption God has for them, they can't seem to stay focused on that conversation. And I think that's the enemy at work. It's like a fly or a bee flying around you. Do you know what I mean? Like, it's very difficult to stay focused on what you're doing when I got this thing. Well, you know this. You got stung twice mowing the lawn the other day. It's annoying, right?
When I tell you I stopped the mower and ran inside, the job was not finished.
Not even close. You just started.
Yeah. I was like, Dad, kill it.
Go do something about this. What's fascinating is this, and I'm not advocating that was a pleasant experience at all. I know it wasn't, but it's not like you were going to die from it.
Have you ever felt persecuted?
Is that your definition of persecution, is getting stung by a bee?
I'm just kidding.
I think we need to rework some definitions of persecution. let me introduce you to some friends of mine in other parts of the world. No, but I mean, okay, but that's the point. That's a really good illustration.
It's not that.
Because in the moment, how big of a deal was it?
It was huge.
Right? Now
all of my cells were treated.
Right. But the reality is, like, was that going to kill you?
It could have.
No, it couldn't have.
See, that's the convenient lie.
It's the convenient lie, right?
This can identify all of these qualities in this
distraction,
situation.
Right? I mean, I'm not saying it's something that shouldn't be addressed, because we went out and we addressed it, and you were able to finish mowing the lawn. But it's one of those things that it's like, but let's not, there's that line by C.S. Lewis that talks about exaggerating the novelty of our situation. I want to read this. Remember, I think we've mentioned this before. You know what I'm talking about? This is where you fill in the gap while I look up the stuff on.
Oh, yeah. No. I don't remember.
Okay.
This is my gap filling. No, but the bee really did hurt.
Oh, here it is.
I'm pretty sure it was a wasp.
No, I think they were bees. Okay, so C.S. Lewis is writing, or this is a radio address that he provided to the British people as they were getting bombed by the Nazis during World War II. So devastation. Everybody knows that there's, all kinds of catastrophe and things like that. And then there's, so that's kind of the mentality. Then you have the ending of World War II, and then you have, now we're living in an atomic age where there's the atomic bomb, and everybody wonders, are we going to be able to destroy ourselves? And what's Russia going to do? What's the Americans going to do? So anyway, he says this: do not let us begin by exaggerating the novelty of our situation. Believe me, dear sir or madam, you and all whom you love were already sentenced to death before the atomic bomb was invented. And quite a high percentage of us were going to die in unpleasant ways. We had indeed one very great advantage of our ancestors: anesthetics. That is the ability to take away pain. It is perfectly ridiculous to go about whimpering and drawing long faces because the scientists have added one more chance of painful, premature death to a world which was already bristled with such chances, and in which death itself was not a chance at all, but a certainty. This is the first point to be made. The first action to be taken is to pull ourselves together. If we are all going to be destroyed by an atomic bomb, let that bomb, when it falls, find us doing sensible and human things, praying, working, teaching, reading, listening to music, bathing the children, playing tennis, chatting to our friends over a pint and a game of darts, not huddled together like frightened sheep and thinking about bombs. They may break our bodies, but they need not dominate our minds. Isn't that awesome?
Yeah.
I found that quote as COVID was like hitting us, because everybody was like, oh no, what is it? And I was like, so the first sermon I preached, and it was an online sermon to the congregation I was leading at the time, was like, whoa, time out. Let me draw from some wisdom from 80 years ago. Let us not exaggerate the novelty of our situation. Which I find incredibly helpful.
Yeah.
So now, when you're getting stung by bees, I'm not saying that's a good thing. I'm not saying it's something to be ignored, something to be addressed, right? But when, we're going through these difficult things, or there's something in my life that is difficult, size it up rightly and address it appropriately.
Yeah.
Okay, so reject convenient lies that cover up the truth, reject distractions that draw me away from the truth, and then reject obstacles that stand between me and the truth.
I think it's interesting how you worded that.
Reject obstacles? How so?
Like, I would almost say, you're not meaning it that, there's an obstacle, I'm just going to, turn around and go the other way.
Yeah.
Unless you are meaning that.
No, I'm not.
Okay.
What I mean is that, you look at it and go okay, I can go through this, I can go over this, I can go around this. I'm going to deal with this.
And overcome it.
But I'm not going to let it stop me.
Okay.
I'm not going to sit, I'm not going to sit in front of the obstacle and go, oh man, it must be nice to have a life that doesn't have this kind of obstacle. That's not help. That doesn't accomplish anything. And we're all tempted to do that. We're all tempted to come up against an obstacle because we know it's going to require more of us than maybe what we had anticipated giving. But this is something I've been thinking a lot about lately in light of that, is that Jesus said, if he who desires to save his life will lose it, but he who loses his life for my sake will find it. If I get to the place that I am willing in my mind and heart to kind of go Lord, you get to do whatever you want with me. Whatever. I don't care what it is. If you want to see fit that you give me a of Job, I don't want it. I don't want to go through that to where I lose my kids, I lose my possessions, I lose everything that has come to define me. If I lose all of those things, okay, yet will I serve you. If you get to that place where you're willing to go I'm willing, I've already lost my life. I've already given my life completely to God. Then when I come up to an obstacle, it's well, God knew this was going to be here. He has a path through it, over it, under it, around it. He has a path. I just need to find the path. Is it going to be harder than I thought? Probably. But is there a path? Yeah, there's a path. Because he wouldn't lead me here to an obstacle without a way
through it or over it or whatever.
Whatever it is, right? So what is that? And because we serve an infinitely creative God, there's always a creative solution to the next step he's calling us to take.
Yeah.
Always a next solution because he is infinitely creative, which to me, that should be one of the things that typifies the person who follows Christ. This copy and paste, previous generations did this and I want to do that. And I see that in that person's life. What do they do so I can have that? It's stop. God has a creative path for your life that is distinctly yours. Not because you're so special, but because he is so creative.
That's
the focus is not on you. The focus is on him and the path he has for you. The question is, are you willing? This is why Jesus says, you must deny yourself and what?
Pick up your cross and follow me.
Exactly. So you have to surrender your life. You have to, if you give your life to, if I were to die today in pursuing Christ, I'm okay with that. Go for it. Okay. man, all of a sudden there's a lot of things that don't matter. Do you know what I mean? So, all right. Anyway, we're talking about removing the log. And I say that as a log because I think these are perspectives people live with. So long as you're clinging to something in the world more than you're clinging to the cross Christ has for you, then that thing is a log to you. It is dominating a perspective in your life that shouldn't be there.
That's good.
Okay. Third.
Commit to self-awareness. I think that's key. Willingly.
Sorry, that's a typo on my part.
Sorry. Like, I'm like trying to read this. I'm like, it doesn't sound right. Willingly know yourself better than you have ever dared. Let that sink in. Willingly know yourself better than you have ever dared.
Yeah, I think we oftentimes want to know ourselves from a position that is very flattering.
That's a good way to put it.
And then as a result, we spend a lot of time and energy managing other people's perspective that we think will be flattering of us versus going, okay, here's a bunch of things that I know. Here's my strengths. Here's my weaknesses. Here's the areas that I know I'm good at. Here's the areas that I know I'm not good at. And I'm learning to be okay with that, which is, for me, I don't think I was really comfortable with that, and probably till I was in my mid-30s, which I think was 10 years later than it was necessary, because I think I was in some leadership positions, and there was some maturity on my part that had to happen to where I had to kind of get to a place of like, I know that's not my strength. I know that's a weak area in my life. Therefore, I've got to build some accountability in that area. I know that I'm never going to be that kind of leader. I wish I was. I wish I could be. I wish I could be given those kind of responsibilities and opportunities, but I don't think I have the gift set to steward that well. Do you know what I mean? So the sooner I can get to that, the sooner I can get to that place to where I'm knowing myself at the pace that God wants me to know myself. Man, there's a tremendous amount of freedom that comes with that. All of a sudden, I'm not trying to prove anything to anybody. I'm just living with who he has me to be. And those are oftentimes what I found, those are the people I enjoy hanging out with. They just know who they are. They're not putting on a show. They're not pretending to be something they're not. Do you know what I mean? There's a great book called Green Light. Have you ever heard of Green Light by Matthew McConaughey? Oh, yeah.
Did Mom read it? I'm sure she's read it.
I don't think she has. I should probably get it for her birthday. She'll listen to this podcast like, ooh, is that what I'm going to get? Was that what came from Amazon the other day? So Green Light, it's a good book. It's actually a really, really good book. Not from a Christian perspective, I don't think. Maybe a Judeo-Christian ethic, and I say that very broadly. But he has this, which, by the way, if Matthew, I know you listen to this podcast, so appreciated what you wrote. Thanks for the book. But he...
Thanks for the book. Is what?
Yeah, if you know Matthew McConaughey, we'd love to have him as a guest on the podcast. That'd be amazing. So,
Bring tomorrow, hey.
Yeah, feel free to connect us. But he has this line in Green Book where he says, part of growing up is discovering who you're not before you're discovering who you are. Which when I heard that, I was like, oh man, I wish somebody would have told me that when I was a lot younger. Because what he was advocating for was go out and try a bunch of things. Like, am I the athlete guy? Well, the only way you're going to know that is if you go try athletics. Or am I the art guy? Or am I the musician? Am I I enjoy corporate world? Am I a house person or an apartment person? Am I living in the country person or a city person? Like, when you're young, there's a tremendous amount of opportunity to just go out and discover who you're not. Because the quicker you can kind of peel that stuff away, And I'm not saying people should step into things that are sinful or inappropriate or anything like that. But there is this process. And in fact, I would argue if one of the things that you see throughout the Gospels is the disciples discovering who Jesus isn't before they discover who he is. And so sometimes we have to strip out those expectations so that those expectations can actually be adequately aligned.
That's really good.
So that's what I would encourage folks to do is like, okay, well, who am I not? And then make that list. Like, I really wish I was a musician. I admire people I admire you playing guitar. I admire people that can just sort of, there's a friend of mine, Brian Schubert, who's got like so much musical talent. I remember one day he sat down and played the piano. He was doing all these different things and chords and sound real fancy and stuff. And I was like, bro, how long have you been playing? He's like, about 1.5 years. And I was like, yeah, okay. That seems unfair. Do you know what I mean? Like I took 3 years of piano and I can't even, I forget I forget how to play chopsticks. Do you know? It's like, I just don't have that in me. And I wish I did, but at some point I got to go, I'm not that.
And that's not who God designed me to be.
Exactly. And that's okay. Now that I may go like, but that puts limitations on me. Okay. Well, okay. That's fine. That just means there's some things that I'm not.
Yeah.
But it also does mean now I'm a little bit closer to who I am, because now I can start peeling away and not be distracted by those things that I'm not. So what this idea of knowing my self-awareness is being willing to know myself better than I dared. And that's one of the things that's behind that is like knowing who I'm not.
And the person that knows you better than yourself is the Lord.
Yeah.
And the minute you start praying, where am I struggling? Where am I excelling? What do I need to be doing with my life? He will answer that.
Yeah, he won't be fuzzy.
He will no.
Okay, second.
Intentionally strengthening your moral compass.
Yeah. And
what do you mean by that?
That's this character piece, right? What's true north? If you say Jesus is Lord, if you say that Christ is the center of your life, and maybe you don't say that. Maybe you're somebody who listens to the podcast and like, yeah, I'm not into all that religious stuff. Okay, well, what's your moral compass? What defines outside of yourself? You don't get to define it. What is the thing that defines your moral compass that says this is my true north? For me, that's Jesus. He is my north. The scriptures aren't my north. The scriptures are the authority to establish Christ as my north, right? The church isn't my north. My finances aren't my north. The relationship I have with family and loved ones, those aren't my north. The thing that is my north is the person of Jesus Christ. So I have to intentionally strengthen that resolve in my heart. So is it wrong to steal?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. When I'm hungry and all of a sudden you start throwing out ethical scenarios, right? And I'm hungry and I have no money and my child is dying of hunger, like, is it now justifiable to steal? Again,
No.
To me, it's one of those like, well, hold on, that's an obstacle. That's something that's in the way, which means what? What did we just establish? God is infinitely creative,
Yeah.
which means he has a creative approach to solving this problem without violating his moral code.
Yeah.
So I don't get to go like, well, my true north is this unless things get difficult. It's like, well, either it is your north or it's not your north. If that's the case, if you're saying my true north is, this truth about who God is, unless things get difficult, then your true north is actually comfort. Or your pleasure, or your safety, or your security, or something. It's not God. It's not the person of Christ. So your true north is the thing that you will look to regardless of the pain or pleasure you experience.
That's good.
Okay, third. This is the self-awareness piece. We got to start wrapping this up.
Aggressively combat vices that strengthen personal, mental, and spiritual well-being.
Actually, that threaten. So
That threaten. What did I say? Strengthen?
Strengthen.
Oh, no.
You aggressively
don't do that.
combat vices.
Is that strengthen personal? I'm like, oh, combat it. Be weak.
Yeah. So, again, like what are those vices? If you have a problem with drinking, don't drink. If you have a problem with alcohol, smoking, don't smoke. If porn's an issue, don't get into porn. If social media is an issue, limit your social media intake, or like bring some accountability. If worry is a concern of yours, do you know what I mean? Like, what are those things that you are naturally drawn to that sort of suck you into this vortex that is self-destructive? Maybe it could be over the short term. It could be over the long term.
Yeah.
But avoid those things, which I think is usually pretty obvious. But we're not just talking about like, don't drink, don't smoke, don't dance, don't go, like that's kind of like old school preaching type stuff. Like I don't know
if that's a real issue.
Yeah, what is it for you? Like, what are those things that threaten to compromise you, your personhood, who you are, your mental, your spiritual, your physical state?
Yeah.
Okay. And then last,
habitually reflect on my decisions in a thoughtful and honest manner.
There's a friend of mine who's a chaplain, and he told me he does this self-reflection every night when he goes to bed. It's his evening prayer before the Lord, where he asks himself, what anger am I carrying? I'm angry that so-and-so didn't do this thing I asked them to do. Right? He's a high-ranking officer. Chaplain Crowderfield is actually his name. Great chaplain. He told me he was one of the first chaplains I met when I joined the chaplain corps. He said, he'll ask the question, what anger am I carrying? And then he's like, all right, Lord, I give you my anger. What fear am I carrying? Lord, here's my fear. I'm afraid of that. And he gives it to the Lord. What sadness am I carrying? I'm sad that this didn't happen. I saw someone react that way.
Yeah.
I'm sad that, you know what I mean? And he walks through those things. It was anger, sadness, fear. I think those are three. And then the fourth one he does is he goes, what joy am I carrying? Lord, I'm thankful that you're on the throne. I'm thankful today I saw this interaction of kindness between these two people. I'm thankful for it. And he just walks through, and that's actually how he ends his prayer every night, is in that place of like, Lord, here's the joy I'm carrying because of what you've allowed me to experience.
That's good.
Isn't that great? Well, that's a time of reflection to kind of go, okay, what were the decisions I made in those moments, right? What led, why do I have an awareness of these things? What is in my perspective, or what is blocking my perspective? If I get to what joy am I carrying and I can't say anything, chances are I have a plank in my eye that's keeping me from seeing what God wants me to see. And so that I got to practice that self-awareness in order for that to be able to come out. All right. So,
embrace a mindset of responsibility.
yes.
Devote myself to difficult truths and commit to self-awareness.
Yeah. This is all related to how to practically grow in righteousness. When we say righteousness, we mean like right relationship. Like, how do you practice? How do you get into right relationship with yourself, with others, with the Lord, most importantly, with his creation? Like, I've got to be willing for my perspective to change. All right. Any closing thoughts?
No. That's how to remove the log. We've walked you through it. There's
and again,
there's a lot.
This is all work that God does, right? It's not work that we do.
Right.
It's related to what he wants to do. But I think he can do all the work he wants. But if we're not willing to step into that stuff, it's not going to matter. All right. Hope this podcast was a challenge to you. You can share, follow, rate, and review this podcast. Lots of you are doing that. Thank you very much. We greatly appreciate that. That's helping us get the traction that we need to let others know what they can expect of this podcast. As we said at the top of the hour, you can follow me on Instagram, X, Facebook. You just look up Milo Curtis. You can follow Olivia on Instagram, olivia.grace_28, as well as on Facebook. If you want to get a hold of us personally, you can email us at hello@thisresilientsoul.com. We're always looking for ways to deepen the quality and expand the impact of this podcast. You can also sign up for our newsletter where we will send out updates periodically. We got a growing number there, so we'd love for you to be part of that inner circle. We want you to enjoy the life God has for you. So we hope that this has been helpful. Thanks for listening.